Hey guys, welcome to another episode of LFA Shop. This week we're going to show you how to replace the fuel pump in your first gen widebody Camry and also how to bypass the immobilizer. Alright, so as some of you may know, I parked the Camry here a few weeks ago. I lowered it and had a bit of a kerfuffle with the wheels and haven't moved it since. So I got new wheels for it, super happy with it. I went to take it for a test drive yesterday and it won't start. So it'll crank over once it's got a battery attached to it because this one's not very good. But I can't hear the fuel pump and it will not start. So I went and bought a fuel pump this morning. So let's jump in and replace the fuel pump on this thing and see if that's our problem. Alright, so coming into the back seat here, I'm pretty sure the fuel pump's under this piece of the back seat. So this has got 3 clips under it, one on either side and one in the middle. So just give that a nice pull up and it should pop out. So get your hand in this corner here, give it a nice yank, same in the middle and then same on that side. And that gives us access to the fuel pump panel. So what I'm going to do is grab a test wire and some screwdrivers. I'll jump in here and we'll test this one before we pull it out. And then we've got the new one just there, ready to go back in. Alright, so I've got some tools. I'll go through those as we get the process done. This is the fuel pump. So I've got a Goss xv10. This is what a fuel pump looks like if you don't know. So there's 2 wiring plugs on the top and then 1 hose for the pressure side. So it's pretty simple. Then there's normally some hose clamps, bit of wiring and a little fuel sock. So I'll get into that as we go on, but for now, let's pull this off. Alright, so most cars are pretty similar. There is some screws holding a plate down, and once you take that off you can get to the fuel tank and the fuel pump hanger. Alright, so with those 5 screws off, this plate just lifts up. So underneath the plate here, there is a electrical connector. So some cars have this on top of the plate, some cars have this underneath the plate. So you just want to push the side in and then lift that plug up. Then that plate will get out your way. Alright, so the next step is to take this plate off here. So to do that, normally you should take the fuel lines off first. Luckily with this one you don't need to label anything. This one will be your return because it's the lower pressure, and this one is a nice fitting, so that'll be your feed. So you just want to undo those 2 nuts from each other, and then this guy, take the hose clamp off and push the hose off. Then the bunch of little 8mm screws around here, so take all of those out. This whole hanger should come out the top. So I just took this guy off here and it started pumping out. So I popped the fuel cap, took the cap off, and it let all the pressure out. So now I can take this hose off and there's no air trying to push this fuel out. So I got this guy off. Now I'll get 2 spanners and undo this guy. Alright, so these 2 fittings here are a 14mm and a 19mm. And I did say before these are an 8, which is correct, but you can use a Phillips head screwdriver. Alright, with those 8 screws out, now we get the fun part of trying to wiggle this out of the top of the tank. Sometimes this can be a huge pain in the bum. Other times it can be like a 96 Camry and come straight out, which is super nice. Alright, this thing is filthy. So the sock's disgusting. The fuel pump is all a different colour. It's all pretty manky, so I don't reckon this thing's been replaced in a long time, if at all. So what I'm going to do first is just check if this actually works at all. So I've got a battery and 2 leads, so I'm just going to plug that into the fuel pump guy, see if it turns on at all. Alright, well that's bad news. It does actually turn on. So I didn't need to replace this, but if you are thinking your fuel pump is bad, power and earth to those front 2 and that'll be able to test it. So that's a bit of a pain. I have got it apart and I have got a new fuel pump, so I'm going to replace it anyway, but that kind of sucks. Alright, so the next step to replace this thing, undo those 2 hose clamps, just slide them up to the left hand side there, which is the top, and then there's a plug on the back for the wiring, and then it should all come out pretty easily. Alright, slight change of scenery. So I've got the soldering iron warming up here, got the fuel hanger and everything, the wires that I need to swap over, and then the new fuel pump and the old fuel pump. So the fuel pump sock, this little guy, so it looks like that if it's old and disgusting. So I need to take this out and mount this guy on here. Alright, so a very important part of this puzzle is this little clip here. Fortunately this kit had 2 in it, so that's nice. So you get your new fuel pump, take off the little cover, and then you want to put the fuel sock on there. So this orientates it, and this one seals it to the actual sock. So it's pretty simple. I'll show you how that works, and then you just push this little clip over the top. Alright, it's just that easy. So you need to push that little collar on with a pair of pliers or similar. Should hold it on there nicely. So this kit didn't come with a spare one of these rubbers which holds it into the housing. So reuse your old one. Let's redo the wiring on the hanger, and then I'll install this into the hanger. Alright, so luckily the old plug and the new plug are very similar. The terminals are different sizes, so the new one is actually bigger, so the old fuel pump will plug into this one but won't plug into the new one. So what I'm going to need to do is rewire this guy. So I've cut the positive side, I'm going to leave this nice and long, solder that guy on there with some heat shrink, and then do the same for the negative. Alright, and there we go. New guy wired on there, so now the fuel pump will connect. So now what I need to do is just install the new fuel pump into the hanger. Alright, fuel pump's all installed. Back to the car. Back in the car, I'm going to show you what I should have started with. A test light. Alright, so I know by looking at this that the bottom 2 are the fuel pump. So I trace the wires on the other side, they run straight to the fuel pump. Over to the plug the test light in, and let's see if we're actually getting power to the fuel pump. So I haven't tried yet, but the next thing I would check would be this immobilizer. Alright, so I don't think we're getting any power to the fuel pump, which means it's probably a fuse or that crappy immobilizer. So what I'm going to do for now is put the fuel pump back in. I'll chuck a 12 volt battery on the fuel pump itself, start the car, move it, and then dive into why we don't actually have power coming from the car to the fuel pump. Alright, so this didn't seem to work, which means that we should have a problem there. Move this guy out the way again, and we're clear to chuck the fuel pump back in. Then I'll show you how to hotwire it, and we can jump it and move the car. So I'll chuck this hose back on, chuck those 8 bolts back in, and then we can jump this guy. Alright, so that's installed back in there. And then I've got a little Milwaukee battery with a little test guy on the end of it. So we just need to put the earth on the fuel pump earth, which we saw before, which is the top right hand side, and then the power on the top left hand side. You should hear the fuel pump kick in, which is great. So we weren't getting that before with the car wiring, so I think our problem is a fuse or maybe that immobilizer. So what I'll do is I'll jump in the front seat, I'll plug this in, and the car should be able to start. So plug this in, then turn the key, car should start. So let's try that. Alright, so all immobilizers normally do is turn the fuel pump off. So if I chuck this guy in, and then I plug in the power to that fuel pump, the car should start. Look at that, almost as if I know what I'm doing. Alright, let's chase this wiring problem. Don't forget to unplug your fuel pump. Alright, just in case it is the fuel pump itself, I'll plug this guy back in, which can be a little tricky with this big old plate in your way. So plug that back in there. Now that should turn on when I turn the car on. No fuel pump. Alright, so the next logical step is to find this immobilizer and delete it. Alright, if I turn the key on a little bit, press the immobilizer, I can hear a relay clicking over here. So that means the immobilizer is probably over there. So I opened this up, emptied all the crap out, and found a little spot that you can jam this guy, which is good, but it still doesn't work. So I need to dig a little bit deeper. So I'm going to pull this out and try and find that relay. Alright, so I'm laying in that position that every amateur mechanic hates. Someone who knows how this will work is probably laughing at me right now. It's probably that box right there. It's the only one that looks a bit dodgy. Normally, it's really obvious. Today, it is not. Excuse the horrible camera angle, but the camera is about 5mm from my face. This wiring here looks a bit suspect. That plug, which you can't see, that plug there doesn't look very Toyota. And I think it runs into this guy. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper, hopefully find this relay. because I am very uncomfortable under here. Alright, I got sticker laying on my back, so I pulled the glove box out. So, when you press the button, the computer integration relay clicks, which makes perfect sense. So now what I need to do is try and work out how to jump the immobilizer. Alright, I've spent ages on this thing, so I'm probably just going to jump it because I cannot work it out. This is proving difficult. So what I'm going to do is just plug in that little battery and get this thing moved, and then I'll try some more things. Funny story, still works, just the fuel pump wires are not getting power. So I could jerry rig this and drive it to work, but I need to fix it properly because that's going to annoy me so much. However, this is not needed if that fuel pump is jumped. So I hate this thing. So I might actually get rid of it. All of this because I want to drive it and see if the tyre's scrubbed. What a pain. Alright, it's a new day. I continued messing with this the other day and cracked a bit of a stinky. So I deleted a bunch of footage and let's start fresh. So I had a couple of mates over last night. They tried to give me a hand with this and we all think it's the immobilizer still. So we're just having problems locating that and turning it off really. So I'm going to start fresh. Alright, quick cleanup. So what I worked out the other day was that the fuel pump from the back runs to this corner here, and there is a wire that is directly attached to the fuel pump just down in there. So obviously going to be really hard to see, but there is one wire in there. I'll try and get the plug out and show you in a minute. So now what I need to do is try and work out where that's supposed to get power from and where the relay is, which there is it's called a circuit opening relay up in here behind this dashboard. So that thing apparently on Camrys is the fuel pump relay, and that is getting 12 volt ignition, but it's not actually turning on. So I think the immobilizer is stopping it from turning on. The relay seems fine as far as I can tell. So then the immobilizer I think is that thing there, the computer integration relay, but I'm going to have a quick look through the rest of the car, see if I can find anything that actually has immobilizer written on it. But for now, I'll just keep looking, and then when I get some more progress, I will update you. Alright, so we've got all these plugs down here in the driver's side footwell. This grey plug here, this big one, if you take that out, and then on the back of it, so the middle wire there, the big blue one, that goes directly to the fuel pump. So I need 12 volt to that wire to turn the fuel pump on, which is actually pretty easy. And I'm assuming that big white and black stripe one just on the left hand side of it there, I assume that's the other one for the fuel pump. So that should be pretty simple, you would think, but now I need to find what actually turns that wire on and where it goes and why it's not getting power. So let's keep digging. Alright, I'll save you the diagnostics process. But what I've done is I've found both sides of the fuel pump wire. So it goes from the fuel pump to the front to the immobilizer, and then I found the wire that comes out of the immobilizer and goes to the relay and the 12 volt. So I've got those. Now what I need to do is just jump them, and then the fuel pump will turn on when the car is on start or running. So that's awesome. I'll show you what I've done. I cannot work out how to turn this thing off or immobilize the immobilizer, but this will work, and it's still relayed, still fused, everything's still happy. It's just jumping the immobilizer. So I'll head around there and I'll show you what I did. All right, so excuse the lighting, but I've got the multimeter on continuity. So if I put these together, you get the little beep. I've also run from that wire that we know is the fuel pump, I've run this wire which can then plug into the multimeter, which I'm going to need 2 hands for, which is super handy. So I got that plugged in. So now if I connect this wire to anything that's connected to the fuel pump over there, then I will get a beep. So in saying that, this connector here goes to the immobilizer or the integration relay computer. And if I go in the back of this guy, so that wire is out of the immobilizer to the fuel pump. And now what I need to find is the wire that goes from 12 volt or from the fuel pump relay, which is up here, to the computer, and then I can jump those two. So then you'll have direct power from the relay to the fuel pump, bypassing the immobilizer. So I'll grab the other end of this multimeter, I'll chuck one in the relay, and I'll show you where that connects. Alright, now this is going to be pretty tricky to show, but up there is the fuel pump relay. If you go to where this terminal is, there's a blue wire just there, so this is plugged into that blue wire. And then if you come back over to this plug over here, we have the continued wire. So That's in and out of the fuel pump via the immobilizer. So we don't want the immobilizer because it's gone to poo. So what I need to do is jump those two wires together. So conveniently, they're both blue. Should make it a bit easier, but that's how you find it if it isn't blue. So what I need to do now is just put a little jump in there and test that the fuel pump comes on when the car is trying to start. Alright, so for this demonstration I've just jumped the wires directly off the back of the harness. So that's pretty simple. Now if I turn the key on to on, so it normally would prime now, which it's not because we haven't got that second signal. That's not gonna end my day, because if I go over here, the car runs and hopefully you can hear the fuel pump. So you might have to prime it by trying to start it. It might be a bit harder to start, but that will get your car running. Managed to get a bit more length here, which has made my life heaps easier. Got those two pins out of the plug, cut this sheath back a little bit, so now all I need to do is join these two together. So I'm going to strip those back, cut the ends off probably, strip them back, a little bit of crimpiness, and then wrap it all back up, put it all back in here, and then we should be good to go. Alright, so I said I was going to crimp it, but I lied, so what I did is just strip those back a little bit, twist them both together, and then just put some solder on there. Yes, I know solder's weak, but there's no actual join here, it's just twisted together. I'm not holding anything together, so it should be fine. Waiting for it to cool down now, then I'll chuck some heat shrink back on it, put it back in the plug where it's supposed to be, not that it really matters, and then put this sheath back over it, wrap it all in tape so it looks like no one's been here, plug it all back together, and we should be good to go. All wrapped up, plug back in. I need to mount the computer integration relay properly, but it's all pretty happy, and then I need to put all that back together, but nothing is disconnected or dodgy down there other than that one wire that is just sitting there. So I'll just do one more test and then I'll put all this back together and we're good to go. No prime, as I said before. Starts, runs fine, and hopefully you can hear that fuel pump. So let's chuck all this interior back together. Alright, we got all the interior back together. Time to give it a bit of a road test. That's all, folks. Alright, so that's it for this week's episode. I hope you've learned something. I know I certainly have. And it's pretty much just to not mess with 90s Toyotas. So this took me way too long, but hopefully with my information, it won't take you as long as it took me. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.